professional historical documentary narrator in the Korean War, is a perfect fit as it is a legendary event in U.S. military history, especially for the Marines, and is filled with incredible facts about survival against overwhelming odds and unimaginable cold. The longest night, an impossible retreat from the frozen hell of Chosin. Imagine a cold so absolute, so hostile, that it stops a machine gun dead in its tracks, a cold that turns morphine into useless ice, and a man's breath into a fatal frost mask. This is the story of the Chosin Few, a story of 17 days in the deadliest, most impossible conditions a U.S. military force has ever faced. It is the epic of a cornered Marine division, alongside U.S. Army and Republic of Korea units, some 30,000 men in total, who suddenly found themselves facing not just 60,000 enemy troops, as intelligence reports suggested, but over 120,000 Chinese soldiers from the newly intervened People's Volunteer Army. Their mission had shifted instantly, not to advance and end a war, but to survive an enemy trap on a scale few armies in history have ever encountered. The trap springs. We are attacking in a new direction. In late November 1950, the UN forces, led by General Douglas MacArthur, believed the Korean War was nearly won. The U.S. 10th Corps, including the vaunted 1st Marine Division, was pushing deep into North Korea near the Chinese border, an area dominated by the man-made Chosin Reservoir, known locally as the Jungjun Lake. High in the treacherous, jagged Taebaek Mountains, Major General Oliver P. Smith, commander of the Marines, viewed the narrow mountain roads and deep valleys with suspicion. He moved with caution, keeping his forces consolidated, a move that would later save their lives, despite being chastised by the overall Corps commander, Major General Edward Almond, for his slow progress. Then came the cold. A Siberian cold front swept in, plunging temperatures to an estimated -36 degrees Fahrenheit, or about -38 degrees Celsius, with wind chills dropping even lower. This was the first, and perhaps most brutal enemy. The extreme cold froze everything. Gun oil turned to grease, making weapons sluggish or inoperable. Jeep and radio batteries died instantly, and vital morphine syrettes had to be carried in corpsmen's mouths to keep them thawed enough to inject into the wounded. Wounds, even minor ones, became catastrophic. Men who had fallen and lost a glove found themselves with irreversible, gangrenous frostbite within minutes. The true horrifying scale of the enemy's presence was revealed on the night of November 27, 1950. The Chinese 9th Army Group, a force of roughly 12 divisions, nearly 4 times the UN force, had slipped undetected into the mountains. Clad in white winter clothing, they were masters of stealth in the snow, lying in ambush for days, with many Chinese soldiers reportedly freezing to death in their hidden positions before the battle even began, a testament to the sheer desperation of their unprepared winter deployment. The night attacks began with a chilling, cacophonous symphony of bugles, gongs, drums, and whistles, designed to terrify and confuse the American troops. The main force of the 1st Marine Division at Udom-ni was immediately cut off from its rear. East of the reservoir, a separate army unit, Task Force McLean, later renamed Task Force Faith, was virtually annihilated in one of the most brutal engagements of the war, its survivors fighting a desperate, disorganized retreat over the frozen lake ice. The Marines were surrounded, isolated, and fighting for their very existence.
The impossible order and the air bridge of life. When Major General Almond ordered Major General Smith to fight his way out of the encirclement and retreat to the port of Hungnam, Smith's legendary reply captured the defiant spirit of the Marines. Retreat? Hell, we're just attacking in a different direction. This was not just bravado. It was a desperate, but calculated plan for a fighting withdrawal, a 78-mile, 13-day journey along a single, perilous main supply road, MSR, to the sea. The Marines' key to survival was the incredible air support provided by Task Force 77 aircraft from U.S. Navy carriers off the coast. Despite the near-Arctic conditions, the naval aviators flew relentlessly, often at dangerously low altitudes. The aircraft delivered not only close air support, using bombs and napalm to blast open enemy roadblocks, but also served as the Marines' only link to the outside world. Astonishingly, the largest airlift of its kind during the war was executed to help the encircled troops. The Chinese had blown up a critical 24-foot-long concrete bridge section at a sheer gorge called Funchilin Pass, a vertical drop over 1,500 feet. The gap made vehicular retreat, which was essential for evacuating the wounded, impossible. The solution was unprecedented. The 314th Troop Carrier Wing of the U.S. Air Force dropped 8 separate 2,900-pound sections of a treadway bridge by parachute. This operation was fraught with danger. Missing the drop zone would have meant losing the entire component into the ravine. But the Marines and Army engineers successfully salvaged the bridge pieces, moved them into place over the chasm, and bridged the impossible gap, allowing their trapped comrades and vehicles to continue the withdrawal. More than just a fight, the humanity in hell. The tale of Chosin is also one of unimaginable personal bravery and moments that defy the very definition of a conventional battle. The thawing of medicine. The freezing temperature rendered the liquid plasma and even the oil in the machine guns solid. The famous and gruesome fact remains that corpsmen were forced to carry the glass morphine syringes in their armpits, crotches, or mouths to keep the fluid warm enough to inject into screaming, wounded men. The sound of the enemy. Marines described the psychological horror of the Chinese night attacks. The constant barrage of bugle calls, whistles, and yells was less a tactic of war and more a chaotic, disorienting soundscape. One veteran famously described it as like the sound of a Chinese birthday party, wedding, and funeral all rolled into one. Hand-to-hand combat. In the close quarters, fog-shrouded, and near-zero visibility conditions of the retreat, many engagements devolved into savage hand-to-hand combat. One Marine famously ran out of ammunition, took on a Chinese soldier armed with a bayonet, and killed him with his Ka-bar knife after being shot in the forearm. The civilian exodus. As the UN forces withdrew to the port of Hungnam, an estimated 98,000 North Korean civilians, terrified of the Chinese and communist reprisal, followed them. In a miraculous act of humanity amid total war, the UN command made the decision to evacuate all of them. This Christmas cargo, part of the Hungnam evacuation, was the largest sea evacuation in U.S. military history, removing not just the 105,000 military personnel, but nearly 100,000 refugees, saving an entire civilian population from certain death. A victory in defeat. By the time the last soldiers and Marines reached the relative safety of Hungnam Port, they had accomplished what military strategists believed was impossible. Surrounded 4-1, fighting in temperatures so low they were a weapon in themselves, the UN forces had not only broken out of the Chinese encirclement, but had done so while inflicting catastrophic casualties on the enemy. The Chinese 9th Army Group, which had comprised 12 divisions, was rendered combat ineffective for months. Estimates vary, but the Chinese suffered over 37,000 casualties, with up to 50,000 men possibly killed, wounded, or lost to the elements, including the death of Mao Zedong's eldest son, Mao Yang, near the reservoir from a U.S. airstrike, a detail kept secret by China for decades. The chosen few, as the survivors of the reservoir would forever call themselves, proved that willpower and tactical brilliance could overcome a monumental enemy advantage and the sheer, raw power of the elements. It was a tactical defeat, as the UN forces were forced to retreat south of the 38th parallel, but it was a stunning moral and strategic victory. By decimating the Chinese forces, the Marines had shattered the communist drive and saved the UN presence in Korea, ultimately preserving the independence of South Korea. Years later, a study of the Chosin veterans revealed another astonishing fact about the deep physical scar the event left. A disproportionately high number of these men, having suffered the worst cold of their lives, retired to the warmest parts of the country, instinctively seeking refuge from the frozen Chosin that had so nearly claimed them. Their story remains an enduring monument to the iron will and unbreakable spirit of the American fighting man, a true tale of survival against nature and overwhelming human force.